Today on the Homebrew Challenge, we're going to brew a beer that I always enjoy making, Belgian Pale Ale. And we're going to address my rather lackadaisical carbonation method by applying a little bit of science to the equation. My name is Martin Keane. I'm taking the Homebrew Challenge to brew 99 beers in 99 weeks. And just the thought that pretty soon all of my beer taps are going to say Belgian something on them, well, it fills my heart with glee. Now, Belgian Pale Ale in particular, you can think of it actually as, well, like sort of a Belgian gateway beer. You see, I'm told that not everybody really likes the distinctive Belgian characteristic of, say, a Trappist ale. Crazy, I know. I don't know what's wrong with these people. But the thing is with a Belgian Pale Ale is it does have some of those very distinct Belgian characteristics, but it combines it with a bready, toasty, malty sweetness that I think most people can enjoy. Here is my grist all ground up. Thank you, Atlantic Brew Supply, for providing this. Now I'm going to put this in and mash today at 150 Fahrenheit. That is 66 Celsius. I need to be better, just say that I couldn't go a day without you. So sit back, let me tell you. Right, it's nicely mixed in. I'm going to mash this for about an hour. Now, by many measures, this beer is quite middle of the road. It's not super high in alcohol like some Belgian styles. It's 5%, so an original gravity of 1050. It's also not super light like a really light triple, or dark like a quad. It's somewhere in between with an SRM of 10 or 11. Now, unlike a lot of Belgian styles that really rely very heavily on the yeast for their character, a Belgian Pale Ale also relies quite heavily on the malt profile. So getting the grist right is quite important. So to that end, I'm trying to use primarily Belgian ingredients in my grist. I have 70% of Belgian Pilsner malt as my base malt in this, and then I have 10% of Caravienne. I then have 5% each of Aromatic Malt, Biscuit Malt and Caramunich 2, and then, not forgetting the mouthfeel, my remaining 5% is Carapils. So here's my regular carbonation method. I'll take some cold crashed beer, move it into a keg, and then bring the keg here to my Keezer, where I have one regulator set to around 30 or 35 psi of pressure at all times. I will charge that keg up to that 30 or 35 psi, disconnect it, and then just leave it in the fridge for a day, or a couple of days, or a week, depending on if I forget about it or not. Sometimes I'll remember to revisit the keg, give it a shake, and then reconnect it to charge it back up to 30 psi. Whatever, at some point the beer is ready to consume, it's ready for a tasting, so I'll relieve the pressure and move it to 10 psi as my serving pressure. Now, this amount of variance means that I sometimes end up with beers that are a little bit flat, and sometimes I end up with some very lively beers indeed. There has to be a slightly more scientific way to do this. And of course there is. You need a carbonation chart. So I can use this chart to see how much pressure I should apply to get the level of carbonation I want. Most beers have a carbonation level of about 2.5 volumes of CO2. So that's what I'm going to aim for. And if I look at this chart, I look at my beer temperature, Typically after cold crashing, it's around 37 or 38 Fahrenheit. And that means to get to around 2.5 volumes of CO2, then I need to apply about 10 or 11 psi of pressure. And to do that, I have this carbonation stone to help me from Spike Brewing. Now when it comes to hopping a Belgian pale ale, you want to go for balance over bitterness. This is not a highly hopped beer, but that does not mean we are skimping on the hops. We just want low alpha acid hops because we don't really want a bitter hop bite to this beer. If you're looking for low alpha acid, you can never go wrong with Saaz hops. I'll be adding this in at the start of the boil, and then with 15 minutes to go, I will add in one other packet of Saaz. And then I'm going to add an aroma hop as well at flame out. This is Styrian Golding. It is also low alpha acid, although that doesn't really matter because we're adding it so late. But this will just add a nice little bit of aroma to this beer as well, and that will go in at flame out. Now I am going to use a Belgian Ardennes, that's Wyeast 3522 in my beer. And I'm going to ferment this at 66 Fahrenheit, that's around 19 Celsius, which is somewhat on the low end, and that's deliberate because I want to stress the yeast just a little bit so that we can really get some of those Belgian flavors out of this beer. But if I am going to stress the yeast a bit, I need to make sure that they are still healthy, and a good way to do that is to aerate. Now normally what I do is I use this is an O2 regulator on an O2 tank, and I have a wand here from Anvil that I just connect to the other end of this and stir it around. Well, it turns out that this item from Spike Brewing, the carbonation stone, can do kind of double duty and also work as an oxygenation stone as well. So that's how I'm going to use it. So what I've done is I've added in onto the end of my regulator here, I've just put a regular old gas quick disconnect, and I'm going to use that to send oxygen into my stone. And just before I do that, I'm going to make sure that this is completely sanitized by dropping it in a bucket of sanitizer. And I'm going to run that at 1 LPM for about a minute. Right, then add in the yeast. But don't run off to the tasting just yet. I'm going to see you in a couple of weeks when I am going to carbonate this beer in the fermenter. Well, in that couple of weeks, I had a chance to look back at my brew day footage, and oh boy, my attempt to oxygenate this was a colossal failure. I messed up in two terrible ways. One, take a look at this regulator here. The tank appears to be empty, so not adding any oxygen. But even if I had a full tank, well, I didn't actually open the butterfly valve, so no beer was exposed to any oxygen that I might have been putting in through the stone. Well, regardless, the beer does appear to have fermented and has finished up. So now I'm ready to carbonate it. I am currently chilling this down, cold crashing it. So I'm going to get it down to around 37, 38 degrees Fahrenheit. I've got my pressure cap on here so I can actually apply some pressure into this keg now. So what I'm going to do is, first of all, open the butterfly valve and then put 11 psi of pressure in. Can you hear that? That's the CO2 going in through the carbonation stone. I think I'm actually doing something this time. And I'm going to leave this now on pressure at 11 psi for about 24 hours before moving it into a keg and then giving it a try. Ready for another Belgian beer then?
Yeah, it's very golden looking. It's quite on the light side.
Yeah, very bubbly.
Yeah.
Yes, well, carbonation worked.
Mm-hmm.
So let's see what we get in the aroma with this.
I smell a light hop to it.
Mm.
I also smell kind of like a sweet note to it as well. It's a little bit sweet.
Let's see what we're in for.
Well, what do you think?
Actually, this reminds me a little bit of British beers in the maltiness of it.
I could see that.
There's definitely a malty base, which I think you picked up on right from the aroma to this. And then the hopping is quite subtle, I think. It's pleasantly hopped, but...
It tastes sweet to me too.
All right, so I've gone to the book.
Okay.
And what was it? What are the characteristics you said for this?
I said it was kind of like, I think, malty, and I said it was definitely on the sweet side, like a caramelly smell and taste.
Yeah, so the BJCP guidelines say there's a malt character that tends to be a bit biscuity with light toasty or caramelly components.
Okay.
So I think you've hit the nail on the head, or perhaps the brewer has hit the nail on the head, because this is as intended, I think.
It's kind of like I've done this before, you know? You know? Crazy.
I think we both have. So recipe in the description. Atlantic Brew Supply also have all of the ingredients in a kit.
And until next time,
Cheers!
cheers.